there's probably going to be a message between here that will interrupt this, but I wanted to get a few announcements out of the way. Well, a few. I don't really know. I'm going to put these on my, what is it called? I forgot its name. Community thing. The thingy I put the poll on, okay? And, uh, if my brain could fucking function. First of all, Series 1. I've been looking for a series. I've been digging literally all today and yesterday afterwards, after a little writing. I was digging for a series. I haven't finished reading this one yet, but if I can get permission, that'd be great. The only problem with it is it's more heavy topic than I normally cover. Like, every single fic I've done, even Black Cats, which was the first series I did, is pretty lighthearted in the sense of it ain't heavy angst or something I'm too concerned about somebody freaking out over, you know? The problem with the fic I found, it breaks that mold. So I genuinely want to ask, should I find, like, should I ask for, like, the less cracky ones? Because the way I have the rules so far, there are two fics that I really want to ask for, but they're not very much crack. Or, oh, okay, there's the message. So they kind of break the usual, uh, mold of what I do. So, I don't know. I want your opinions on that, or even some suggestions in the comments. Okay, well, we're done with that announcement. Time to get on to the, actual, like, fic stuff here. So here's the tags and stuff. Jen, why are you surprised? Um, Powerloader and Midoriya. I gotta figure out how to say Majima? Okay, I'm googling Powerloader's name after. Um, Midoriya Inko and Midoriya Izuku. This one actually does have a slash ship. It's literally for like a paragraph, so I didn't really care. Midnight slash Midoriya Inko. Okay, characters: Midoriya, Izuku, Powerloader, Midoriya Inko, Midnight, and Nezu. Midnight is there for only like a paragraph though. Additional tags: Crack, Vigilante Midoriya, Parental Mamaji, Babaji, fucking Powerloader. When I'm involved, you're always only a stone's throw away from adoption. Good parent Midoriya Inko. Split some Midoriya slash Inko on my whips. I hope none of it got into this fic. Okay. The Hidden Benefits of Breaking and Entering by MothMothhMothh. Summary. Someone has been breaking into the support course classroom after hours. Rather unintentionally, Powerloader discovers who. There was a screeching sound coming from the vents. Majima noticed. Usually, in such a situation, he'd assume it was Nezu, but he'd had a recent issue revolving around supplies moving around during the night. Meaning the logical next step to take was evidently to turn the lights off and hide under his desk until the intruder arrived. The movement grew closer, rattling through the ceiling itself. A brief moment of silence was the only time given for Majima to take in a deep breath before one of the ceiling tiles shifted, creating space for a masked figure to descend from above, dropping down and silently assessing his surroundings. After spotting nothing of note, somehow missing the hero's large helmet piece poking out from behind his hiding spot, he chucked down what appeared to be damaged support gear, selecting a range of tools from the designated places around the classroom. It was a practice motion, fluid in nature, and Majima found several questions simultaneously answered. I take it you're our new secret visitor? He slunk out of his hiding place, arms crossed in the typical, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed stance. The boy startled, leaping up at a leaping an impressive height back into the ceiling, mysterious gear carelessly abandoned. With speed only possible due to years of hero work, Hajime leaped leapt after him, dragging the boy back down. He reached for the stranger's mask, stopped before the motion could be complete by violent kicks hastily delivered to his ribcage, not dissimilar to a reaction one might expect from an agitated rabbit, with rather worrying strength. Thanks to this reaction, the masked figure was able to slip away, dis- disappearing from sight within seconds. The teacher stood still for a moment, eyes catching on the discarded equipment left behind. With far less hesitance than sensible, he approached the lightly mangled gear, turning it over in his hands, granted no additional information on anything regarding the item or its owner. Cautiously, he placed the item in one of his desk drawers, handling it like a priceless artifact and not the scrap remains of a broken project. One week had passed since Midoriya had last entered the support course. His patient had long since run out, only the nagging voice of anxiety keeping him away. That voice was silent now, however, and Midoriya found himself slinking through his typical route, slowly pausing every 3 knee shuffles to check for outside sounds. Only silence greeted him, though, and his journey was uninterrupted. After moving the ceiling tile, he waited painstakingly, shaking mildly with how tense his muscles were, ready to launch in the other direction at the slightest warning. The lack of any evidence of life, Midoriya slowly dropped down, landing softly on the tiled floor. With skilled precision, Midoriya began his work, selecting his usual plethora of tools and prying open a space in the wall he discovered several visits earlier. From the little hole he pulled out several incomplete projects, keeping an eye out for any movement as he worked. Slowly, slowly making progress. Lost in his work, by the time he glanced at the classroom clock, he couldn't hold back the violent wince at what it displayed. With a deep sigh, he packed away his borrowed items, carefully placing them back in their respective places. Just as quietly, just as hastily as he arrived, Midoriya left. A blanket of silence descended upon the room, motionless as the faint rustling in the vents grew more distant. Once the dregs of sound died out, Majima stretched out, crawling out from the space behind the whiteboard at the front of the room that he most certainly did not create for the sole purpose of keeping an eye on UA's particular visitor. After several minutes of cracking his joints and checking his circulation wasn't permanently fucked, he slid over to where the teenager had been tinkering, opening up the compartment in the wall. He pulled out the support items the boy had been working on. They were interesting, with lack of a better word. Not that they were well made, more that it was painfully and undeniably obvious that the creator was self-taught via the odd video online. Pulling a small screwdriver from one of his pockets, Majima tightened a single screw an unnoticeable amount, aligning all the X shapes perfectly. Putting the gear back where he found it, He fished out his phone to send a single message to Nezu. Midoriya did not abandon his caution completely, waiting 3 days until the next he returned to the support classroom. Tugging out his main project, Midoriya turned it over in his hands, a mild frown on his face. His hand stilled as he reached the aligned screws, freezing mid-motion, as if handling an explosive substance. Midoriya released his project, taking a long step back towards the opening in the ceiling. From behind the whiteboard, Majima emerged, falling to the ground in the process, but neither party acknowledged that, revealing himself to the masked intruder. In a manner nigh identical to a deer in headlights, Midoriya froze. As if approaching a cornered animal, Majima held out his arm, and a small lunchbox occupying his hand extended a clear offering. Midoriya, rather understandably, hesitated, shifting on his feet in an indecisive motion. After a long pause, void of sound or movement, as if the earth held its breath, he lunged forward, skeptically close enough to clutch the box and, with surprising gentleness, acquire the item safely. Once it was solidly in his possession, he leapt for the ceiling, scrambling away as if his very being depended on it. Upon his eventual arrival at home, he cautiously opened the lid to reveal a small handmade array of food. He stood, staring, silently, for a moment or two. With practiced ease, he ignored the blurring of his vision. It was impossible to miss the lights in the support course being on, but Midoriya dropped down into the classroom anyway. Majima offered the teenager a small grin and a nod of approval before continuing with the work on his computer that should have been completed a minimum of a month ago. From behind the screen, the teacher watched him work, fluidly in a manner that reminded the hero of a dancer. Almost, hands gliding over tools before setting on the one required. Every time he glanced up from the borderline torturous lesson plan to check in on the boy's progress, he felt a smile creep onto his face. After an hour or two, he opened up his desk drawer, pulling out an identical box to the one he previously given the teenager. He was almost certain the aforementioned teenager had something to do with the spate of incapacitated villains that had been turning up in the surrounding area recently, due to the minor, read major, consistencies in outfit and demeanor. But that didn't really matter at the moment. He cleared his throat in an attempt to gain the possibly most certainly a vigilante's attention. It was a fruitless effort, and Majima ended up walking over to his workstation to deliver the item. He looked up from his work, regaining awareness of his surroundings. The teacher displayed the box, and a flash of indiscernible emotion passed over Midoriya's face. Flighting indifference, he grabbed it, shooting Majima a hesitant smile that was, in fact, not visible from underneath his mask. The gesture was somehow picked up on, and the hero returned to his desk with his newfound sense of accomplishment. Only the background droning of metal on metal and keyboard typing filled the room, staving off the silence for the next hour or so. With one final motion, Midoriya's project was complete. He held the orbish object up, admiring it under the glaring classroom lights. Majima glanced over, curiosity piqued. Finished? He asked, abandoning his desk to join the teenager. Acknowledging the question a second or two too late, Midoriya nodded. Majima grinned, a mischievous expression that suited his features. Midoriya was, suddenly, quite relieved to be on friendly terms with the man. "What's this piece of work do?" he asked, admiring it like a fine jewel. Midoriya didn't get a chance to respond, however, as the activation switch was gleefully pressed on the hero's gloved hand, a low hissing sound emanating from the spear as the sedative spilled out. It was only thanks to the mask Midoriya specifically designed that he remained conscious. Power Loader, however, was less lucky. A wince was all the teenager had to offer as Majima collapsed to the floor, asleep. "I guess the efficiency increase was effective," he mused offhandedly, mildly surprised by the quick loss of consciousness. He slipped the offending item into his pocket, making a mental note to reload it later. With more effort than anticipated, Midoriya managed to drag the man to a seat, draping him over it like a soggy towel. He stared blankly at the man, barely withholding judgment on the unique hero costume he'd settled upon. After a moment of careful consideration, he shed his jacket, positioning it like a small, stab-proof blanket. Admiring his handiwork, he allowed himself a smile, turning back to his workstation to pack away the unfinished projects and misplaced tools. Rather unfortunately, it was only after he'd long left UA's building that and was actively crawling through his bedroom window that he recalled his mother's tendency to write his names in most articles of clothing. After a moment, frozen in fear, he shrugged. He was somewhat certain his jacket had escaped such treatment. Back at UA's support clerk's classroom, the aforementioned jacket innocently lay in its draped position, small, tidy written writing on the label proudly stating, "Not the property of Midoriya Izuku," complete with a small heart. That night, Midoriya slept soundly, unaware of the identity-exposing article of clothing. In a stroke of nothing more than dumb, unadulterated luck, when Majima finally awoke, groggy and weary, he was in no state to even consider taking notice of such a detail. With a toothy yawn and a deep sigh, Majima tapped the space bar on his computer and returned to his long procrastinated lesson plans. Several hours after waking, Midoriya stumbled downstairs, barely avoiding slipping on his half-on sock. Inko was on a call in the kitchen, although Midoriya hadn't seen this side of her in a long time. Not as though it was a bad thing. The opposite, in fact. He smiled softly at the scene, and she spotted him, holding her hand over her phone to the muffler the caller's hearing. "How was the library?" She stepped closer, pulling him into a half hug. "Good," he responded, sneaking a slice of fruit she'd been cutting. She shot him a glare, lacking any heat, and held back a chuckle. "You heading out soon?" The teenager nodded. Inko brushed a lock of hair out of his face. "Make sure to keep safe, okay? Mitsuki mentioned some robber in the area." She sighed nostalgically. "When I was your age, I was always getting into fights." Midoriya glanced to the side nervously. "Getting into trouble with the police and such." She placed a hand on his head soothingly. Midoriya blinked owlishly at that information drop that had come out of seemingly nowhere. Don't wait to call for help if you need it, okay? Well, Midoriya shrugged. Remember to check where I am if you're worried. A week before beginning his mild vigilantism, he'd taken the initiative to encourage his mother to install an app, informing her of his location as a simple precaution in case he were to get stabbed or severely injured. After the brief conversation died out, the two split ways. Inko returned to her call, waiting for Midoriya to leave earshot before continuing. He's got no fucking clue, I know. A crisp laugh drifted down the line. I'm sure he'll be out this evening. She paused. If you'd like to come over. The laugh returned louder and bolder. See you at 11 then, Inko. Namuri's flirtatious tone cracked slightly over the call. The birds went silent. Midoriya winced slightly at every sound as he tugged his window open. His clock attempted to warn him of the unseemly time, an action that was skillfully ignored by the teenager, disregarding the blazing red digits beckoning him back in. Lounging on the sofa with a glass of wine in one hand and several strands of Midnight's blue hair in the other, Inko stared at the multiple screens currently displaying security footage of the surrounding buildings. Midoriya stuck his head out from behind the wall he was currently hiding behind, staring holes into the back of the criminal's hood. His hand drifted to his tool belt, but before he could take a single step forward, a small pebble assaulted him, landing a hit on his elbow with, albeit accidental, impressive accuracy. After a short moment, 3 or so minutes, involving absolutely no rolling on the floor in silent tears, he regained his composure. This was near instantly greeted with the second stone smashing into his shin. An additional brief recovery later, he stared at the location he assumed the projectiles came from, locking eyes with none other than Hajia fucking Majima. He pointed at the teacher, jaw dropped in something similar to a smile. The hero pointed back, expression identical, making a motion that Midoriya was unable to decipher. He held up a finger in a pause, fishing in his pockets until his hand brushed against a certain orbish object. He tugged it free, pressing the button on the side and lobbing it at the criminal with the rage previously directed at Majima, landing a solid hit on his head and sending him straight to a one-on-one meeting with the cold pavement below. A wave of realization washed over him as he recalled exactly what had happened to the Savere in the support gear, but, with luck befitting a saint, or perhaps the finder of a nine-leaf clover, his shot had managed to soundly knock out the criminal. Midoriya shot a guilty look at the hero, who promptly jumped down from the roof, somehow avoiding catching his gauntlets on the ledge. He shed one of the aforementioned gauntlets in order to reach into his shoddy modified pocket on his oversized and evidently unworn t-shirt, pulling out a pair or reinforced handcuffs and securing them around the criminal's wrist, finishing off the encounter by pressing a button on his headgear. Dangling their feet on the edge of the roof, like misbehaving children, Majima and Midoriya sat as the lights of the police van faded away, the boxed lunch between them slowly depleting. Midoriya had managed to keep his mask on, of course, bunching it up above his mouth to fully indulge in the shared meal. As the light of the hero's phone cast large shadows across the flat surface they were sitting on. "How's school?" Majima tried awkwardly. Midoriya shrugged. "Fine. You've finished those lesson plan yet?" Majima choked on his food, taking a moment to recover. Tensely, as if prepared to encounter a wild animal, he opened his mouth. "How's home?" Midoriya ignored the odd behavior. "Pretty great." Relief visible, Majima cracked a smile, eyes hidden behind his hair, headgear cautiously placed on the floor behind the pair. "Any room for an extra parent?" The teacher laughed freely. "I'm afraid my mother's got her eye on someone, but I won't say no to the addition of a weird uncle, I guess." The hero nudged Midoriya in mock anger, says the teenage vigilante. They sat there for a while longer, peaceful, with a sigh worthy of a battle-hardened warrior. Midoriya clutched at the lower end of his mask, still rolled just under his nose, tugging it up in one swift motion, his eyes scrunched up as awaiting a reaction. A disbelieving chuff was the first response given. He forced his eyes open. "You're literally in the heroics course. Exactly what is the point of becoming a vigilante?" Midoriya shrugged mildly. Guess I'm an impatient guy." Majima's phone buzzed, and he turned it over to see the message. "You're just a stone's throw away from adoption now, my dear employee." Nezu's smug demeanor somehow perfectly translated through text. Back at the Midoriya household, Inko sighed sweetly, arm draped over her sofa mate. "Guess it's a good thing he's got a spare emergency contact." Midoriya never got his jacket back. It was decimated in a lab explosion, completely unrelated to both of them and his freshly acquired uncle. Okay, that's the end of this fic. I actually did ask the author if the murder was Majima, or not Majima, if the murder of the jacket was May. And yes, May, the unintentional accessory to vigilantism. Okay? May was the intentional accessory. I had a lot of fun podpicking this, even though I had a stroke speaking today. I actually had a little spectator the whole time. Dust, you can say hi if you want.
Howdy.
Yep. Been chilling in call with me while I've been struggling to say words. Do check if you did just skip the ramble. This is the second heads up. Series 1, the little poll thing I did. But I've been struggling to find series. Okay? Because of my little set of stuff that I've been doing. I did find two that I am interested in. One of them I'm pretty sure I can get permission for. The other, it's a 50-50 right now, it's seeming. Okay? I'm gonna try, but the thing is, they kind of both don't fit the usual that I do. AKA usual being crack on crack fix. This is a crack one shot. What do you expect? So I'm still wondering what people think. Please tell me your opinions and thoughts. And do check out the author. Moth is great. Thank you, Moth, for letting me podfic. I do have a blooper. Bye! Majima choked on his